Greetings from the World Ethanol Biofuels Conference in Brussels. I'm joined by Charles Albert Pearce, who's the president of ePURE. Charles, if you look at the recent reports that have come out from industry bodies like the IEA, the IPCC, I think there's a disconnect between the amount of bioenergy these reports are advocating and what's currently on the table in terms of European policy. What do you think accounts for that?
Well, it's clear that if you look to the RED II, future RED II, Renewable Energy Directive 2, where they say we will have as target to have 14% bioenergy in transport, but in these 14% you have 7%, which is a complete unknown factors with a lot of multipliers. It comes to the conclusion that at the end of the day, 2030, there will not be any more biomass energy in the transport sector as today, or very little. And it's obvious that the European Commission don't believe really in bioenergy. They just believe in electricity, but the EU mix of electricity is far from being renewable.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're right in saying that there's this sense, particularly among regulators, that electrification in transport is the way forward. But I'm getting a different message from listening to the conversations at this conference about how biofuels and electrification can actually work together to decarbonize the transport sector. So could you explain a little bit more about how that might work?
If you look to all the studies on the cars, you will see that, for example, today the average aging cars in Europe are about 11 years. What does it mean? That means that if you buy a car today, you have a reasonable chance that this car will still be on the street of Europe in 2030. So you have to take that into account. You can take a lot of assumptions. For example, Ricardo has made assumptions on that and others. And the numbers of electric cars, including plug-in hybrids, are estimated between 10 and 20% in the next by 2030. What does it mean? That means that there will still be, in 2030, about a minimum of 80% of combustion engine cars running. And the idea is that we have to decarbonize the fuel of these cars, and not wait that eventually in 10, 20, 30 years' time, there will be an electrification of all the cars, and in the meantime do nothing. So it's very important that biomass and that, for example, ethanol plays an important role in the decarbonization in existing fuels, and that has to be immediate.
I think one of the measures I like that ePURE advocates, because it's very simple to implement, is the labeling of fuels. Do you think that consumer choice will be a driving factor in the decarbonization of transport, or is it mostly to do with regulations?
Well, there is an interesting experience about consumer choice. If you look to diesel cars, for example, between 2009 and 2014, there was no obligation to put any catalyst on cars, only from up to 2014, but catalysts were on the market. And if you take a brand like BMWs and others, they were proposing a catalyst as an option. And about 5% of the people during that period of time has taken the option. That means that 5% of the consumers are really considering to paying a higher price to reduce emissions in transport. So without regulations, which have the goal of driving the change and the energetic transition, it will be very difficult for me to have a natural market going there.
Mm-hmm. And something else I think that comes out of the regulation is this focus on cellulosic ethanol production. But I'm not sure whether there really is a credible prospect for a breakthrough on cellulosic ethanol in the near future. How do you think that will play out? Is there anything regulators can do to help that? What's ePURE's perspective?
Well, cellulosic ethanol, if you look to cellulosic ethanol, technology exists. You can produce, you can build a plant today, you can invest 150 million euros in a cellulosic ethanol plant to produce between 50 and 80,000 cube ethanol. You need, of course, to have the reliable source of biomass at economic conditions. But if you have that, you can build tomorrow a cellulosic ethanol plant. Why are the people not doing that today? Or very few are doing that today? Mainly for two reasons. Is that the cost price of cellulosic ethanol is higher than the conventional. And when we see that the conventional ethanol prices are every year more cost effective and cheaper, the difference between that and the cellulosic ethanol price is quite high. It can be the double. And at the end of the day, who will pay the price for it? There is no regulation who says that, okay, the consumer have to pay the price for it. That is part one. A second big problem is the uncertainty of investment. We have seen with RED 1, for example, that they start 2008, a project for 2020, everybody built plans, and then 4 years later they revised the situation and they created an enormous uncertainty on the market. Today, the RED 2, which is not definitely on paper today, they already say that they will revise that in 2023 and so on, and the maximum is vision to 2030. So if you do an investment now in biofuels in Europe, and especially in non-mature technology like 2G, you have to make sure that you have a payback in a very reasonable time, because you still have a big uncertainty. You don't know what they will do in 10 years' time. So that creates an enormous problem for investors to invest in 2G today.
Excellent. Thanks very much for your time.